Hello everyone. Welcome to this channel. I'm your old friend, a YouTube obsessed with long videos, especially those that expose the harsh truth and offer a key to salvation. Imagine this for the sake of the black gold underground oil. A nation's leader orders tanks to roll across the border, missiles to strike schools and hospitals, and in just a few months, over 100,000 innocent civilians lose their lives. Homes are reduced to ruins, children lose their parents, and survivors live with lifelong trauma. The person who gave the order, initially a reform hero in the eyes of the people, is ultimately wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Why? How could a rational leader willingly commit such a crime? Today, we'll dissect this fictional yet incredibly real oil war story. The Republic of Elam launched a devastating invasion for the oil reserves of the Nolan Federation. The core issue wasn't oil itself, but rather three fatal cognitive biases in President Victor's mind, biases that, like a virus, silently destroyed a nation and could potentially destroy your life. After watching this video, you'll learn how to protect your mental well-being and avoid being manipulated by similar biases in a world where resource competition is increasingly fierce in 2026. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we can dig deeper together. This is definitely one of the most poignant crime psychology videos you'll see this year. The story takes place in the fictional Republic of Elam. This country was once poor but full of hope. When President Victor took office at the age of 40, he was a typical American dream figure. He promised to reform the economy, fight corruption, and ensure every family could own a car and have electricity. The people loved him because he was young, visionary, and had publicly stated, "Resources are the lifeblood of a nation, and we must develop them peacefully." However, Elam's underground oil reserves are limited, while its neighbor, the Federation of Nolan, possesses vast oil fields, accounting for 15% of the world's proven reserves. In the world of 2026, oil is no longer just fuel, it's the lifeblood of geopolitical competition. The slow adoption of electric vehicles, geopolitical conflicts disrupting supply chains, and the scenes of ordinary Americans queuing at gas stations and experiencing soaring prices are familiar to everyone. After Victor took office, Elam's economy experienced rapid growth, but his anxiety grew. Intelligence indicated that if Nolan's oil reserves were friendly developed, Elam could earn tens of billions of dollars more. However, if its rivals seized them, Elam could face an energy crisis, factory shutdowns, and a wave of unemployment. Victor began writing in his private diary, "Oil is not a luxury, it's survival. This is the seat of crime. The difference between national interest and my country must have it is just one step of cognitive slippage." Friends, in the American workplace, haven't you also seen bosses constantly talking about company survival, only to disregard the lives of their employees for the sake of KPIs? This is the starting point of human nature. It all started with a small skirmish. A shooting occurred between border patrol teams, resulting in casualties on both sides. Normal countries would negotiate and investigate, but at an emergency meeting, Victor, his face grim, said, "This is a threat to our survival from Nolan. If we don't retaliate, we'll run out of oil tomorrow." He ordered a small-scale retaliatory airstrike. The first attack resulted in only a few dozen casualties, and his domestic approval rating surged. The public felt their leader had guts. Victor tasted the sweetness of power. The dopamine rush of controlling destiny acted like a drug. The criminal psychology speculation section begins. Victor wasn't born bloodthirsty. He was an idealist in his youth. But with power in hand, his survival instinct was amplified. He interpreted Nolan's oil as an attack on my personal legacy, not a rational calculation, but a primal fear activated by power. Psychologically, this dehumanization was triggered. The opponent was no longer the people of a neighboring country, but a monster stealing my job. Have you ever had a similar moment? Like arguing on social media, where you amplify someone's comment into a character problem and the argument escalates? The leader simply amplified this bias at the national level. War officially broke out. Victor formed a victory committee, allowing only good news intelligence to enter. Opponents were marginalized, even labeled traitors. Intelligence indicated Nolan's army was weak, and the international reaction was mild. He believed only this, ignoring warnings that the invasion would trigger long-term sanctions and civilian casualties would provoke global anger. This is the first cognitive bias, confirmation bias. His brain automatically filters out uncomfortable information, retaining only evidence supporting the conclusion that oil must be secured. Real psychological research shows that this bias makes decision-makers appear biased, increasing their error rate several times over. A deeper analysis of criminal psychology. Victor, alone in his office late at night staring at oil maps, might be thinking, "I'm right. History will prove me right. Those who oppose me are just cowards." Power puts him in an echo chamber, amplifying his dopamine circuitry, and each small victory reinforces his belief that he is a savior. This isn't madness, but the inevitable result of a normal person's cognitive system being distorted by ambition when in power. An example in the American context: you invest in a stock that has already fallen 20%, but you only look at optimistic analyst reports and continue to buy more. This is confirmation bias, destroying your wallet. In the third month of the war, the Elamite army was advancing smoothly, but logistics collapsed, and international sanctions began to bite. Economic data showed that continuing the fighting would shrink Elam's GDP by 30%, but Victor roared at a meeting, "We've already lost thousands and spent hundreds of billions on the military. Stop now? What about all the sacrifices we've made?" He ordered intensified bombing, including targeting civilian areas near the oil fields. The death toll soared from thousands to tens of thousands. The second fatal bias, the sunk cost fallacy. Classic psychological research shows that people will continue to throw money and lives into investments that are already irreversible, even if rational calculations indicate that they should cut their losses. A key element of criminal psychology analysis. The focus of this chapter: Victor knew deep down that the cost would be heavy, but his brain's loss aversion mechanism was activated. Admitting defeat is equivalent to admitting guilt, and that cognitive dissonance is too painful. So he chose to add fuel to the fire, rationalizing the massacre as a necessary sacrifice. He thought, "The more civilians die, the faster we can take the oil fields. The bloodshed before won't have been in vain." This distorted survival instinct transformed him from a reformer into a cold-blooded decision-maker. Each escalation order was accompanied by a slight tremor in his heart, but the thrill of power quickly outweighed any guilt. Friends, this is all too real. Many Americans after divorce continue to suffer because they've already invested 10 years, even though they no longer love each other. Company bosses continue to burn money on projects they know will fail, simply because millions have already been spent. The leaders simply amplified this bias 1,000-fold. Victor's confidants formed a closed circle. Anyone who said, "Let's call a ceasefire," was immediately branded a traitor. The only voices in the meeting room were, "Yes, we will definitely win." The third bias, groupthink. Psychological research has found that when groups crave harmony and fear conflict, they suppress dissenting opinions and make disastrous decisions. Classic symptoms include fantasizing about one's invincibility, demonizing opponents, and self-censorship. A deep dive into criminal psychology. Victor gradually lived in a power island. He was no longer the president who listened to the people's will, but a god surrounded by flattery. When intelligence indicated that bombing civilian areas would cause massive casualties, his confidants collectively remained silent or echoed, "For the greater good, it must be done." Victor's remaining morality was overwhelmed by collective rationalization. He began to believe, "These civilians are a necessary price for the war. I am doing this for the eternal sake of the nation." This psychological breakdown unfolded like dominoes. First, small lies convinced him. Then, he ordered the use of more brutal methods. Finally, he completely lost empathy. Dehumanization was complete. Civilians were no longer people, but numbers hindering oil development. In the US, this is illustrated by examples like a company team working on a failed project, where no one dares to speak the truth, ultimately leading to a mass exodus, or in a family gathering. Relatives collectively deny the seriousness of a problem, leading to even greater disaster. This is how groupthink destroys people in everyday life. The war entered its darkest phase. Victor authorized the saturation bombing of Nolan's major cities, with civilian areas near the oil fields becoming prime targets. The death toll surpassed 100,000. The international community was shocked, calling it a crime against humanity. Now, we enter the most brutal section of criminal psychology speculation. Why did Victor willingly go this far? First, his motivation shifted from national revival to the perpetuation of personal power. Oil ceased to be a resource. It became a tool for proving his greatness. The psychological theory of cognitive dissonance explains this. When his actions massacre conflicted with his self-image, heroism, he deceived himself through a moral licensing mechanism. I'm killing bad people for a greater good. Second, the dark desires brought by power were unleashed. Research shows that the reward system in the brains of long-term power holders changes, with decreased sensitivity to risk and the suffering of others. Victor, watching the battle reports every night, found the thrill of controlling life and death addictive. Like a drug, he would think to himself, if I stop, I'm a loser. If I continue, I'm a conqueror. This distorted survival instinct led him to tie the fate of the nation to his personal narcissism. Going deeper, the decision-making process was riddled with cascading biases. Confirmation bias led him to only see false intelligence suggesting victory was in sight. Sunk cost prevented him from turning back, and groupthink blocked him from hearing the truth. These three factors combined to form a psychological black hole. Ordinary people, if given power, can also gradually become like this, not because of evil, but because human weaknesses are amplified by power. Imagine Victor's inner turmoil in his final moments, standing before the map, his hands trembling as he issues his final order, murmuring, "This is for Elam, for me." At that moment, he is no longer human, but a war machine driven by bias. This part is incredibly powerful, isn't it? In 2026, seeing various resource conflicts in the news, shouldn't we be alarmed? Ultimately, the international coalition intervenes, and the Elamite army collapses. Economic sanctions cause prices to skyrocket in Elam, and people take to the streets in protest. Victor is overthrown, arrested while on the run, and faces trial for crimes against humanity. The country is divided, the oil dream shattered, and it will take a decade to recover. The ultimate cost of cognitive bias. A nation goes from prosperity to ruin, all because of one person's psychological black hole. To summarize these three fatal biases. 1. Confirmation bias, only listening to what you want to hear, blinding yourself. 2. Sunk cost fallacy, continuing to pay more for what has already been lost. 3. Groupthink collective frenzy in the echo chamber. These aren't just for leaders. In the US in 2026, you'll face this every day, stubbornly holding on to failed investments, refusing to admit you've chosen the wrong side at work, and having your social media feeds algorithmically fed only echo chamber opinions. The nation will crumble, and your personal life will collapse. The good news is, knowing the bias allows you to overcome it. Here are 7 practical tips you can screenshot and act on. 1. Before making a decision each day, ask yourself, if I hadn't invested this much, would I still continue? Break the sunk cost barrier. 2. Develop the habit of confirmation bias. Intentionally find 3 opposing opinions, write them down, and then decide. 3. Break the island. Find a friend or colleague who disagrees with you each week, and sincerely listen to their feedback. 4. Cultivate empathy training. Spend 5 minutes each day imagining your opponent's situation, like the role reversal exercise in American psychotherapy. 5. Examine from the perspective of your future self. Ask yourself, will I thank myself for today's decision 10 years from now? 6. Stop-loss list. Set clear exit rules such as mandatory selling if the investment drops by 15%. 7. Regular psychological audit. Review major decisions monthly to check for any deviations. Friends, in 2026, when resource competition is increasingly fierce, we ordinary people cannot change the country, but we can protect our own minds. Don't be an accomplice, don't be manipulated, and use clarity and empathy to build a strong life for yourself. If you learned something from this story, please like and share it with your friends to avoid becoming victims of cognitive bias. Next time, we'll delve deeper into more long videos on criminal psychology and self-improvement. Thank you for watching. See you next time.